Hello, my name is Andreas and today I'll be teaching you in digital drawing inside of Photoshop. We're working with this file that I've put up on Canvas, and this file will eventually look somewhat like this. We'll be adding colors, we'll be adding shade, and we'll try to make it look funny. So in order to complete this tutorial and add colors and shapes, we'll just make sure that everyone is using the same working space. So inside of Window, we'll make sure that we're working with Essentials. So I'll choose Window Essentials, and then just to make sure that we have it reset back to the standard program settings, I'll reset Essentials like that. And then finally I'll add one panel which will be brushes inside of Window Brushes. I'll just add that so it's located over here. Some of you might have a lot of weird brushes from previous tutorials with me in Photoshop. So just to clean up everything inside of brushes, we'll just go into the burger menu and choose Restore Default Brushes. So we're just working with the general preset brushes from Photoshop. So let's just start out. The first thing we'll do inside of this file is, just one moment, I'll just double click libraries so I have more space inside of layers. I'll click my two arrows up here just to expand my tools so it's easier to see them. And I'll just open up my group here called Drawing, and here you'll see that there are some different layers, and the different layers that's located here is actually, if I'll just go back to the start from when I actually scanned my picture. This is made as a hand drawing. First, you'll notice that it's very sketchy. It has all these, hand drawn lines, and it's been scanned on some scanner or printer. And so the next step after having scanned my sketch is actually to try to refine it inside of Photoshop. Just draw on top of the scanned sketch to make some nicer lines. I'll just switch off the rough layer. Here you'll see it's trying to really make some nice shapes out of this drawing. And finally you would choose perhaps a black contour to just make the final outline. So this is a three-step process where the sketch has become more and more clearly defined and ready to become a cartoon character inside of Photoshop. So the first thing we'll do before we start coloring, because we will be using inside of the gradient tool, we'll be using the paint bucket tool, and the first thing we'll do is close some gaps in my final outline, because if I don't close those gaps, I'm just going to make a new layer, and we'll call that color. Let's make a layer called color, and I'll just put that below my drawing. And you notice that if I select some kind of purple color and just try with my paint bucket to fill it in here, you'll notice that it will color the entire background as well, aside from also coloring some of its fur and some other parts of this creature. So what we're going to do is we're going to click undo, and we're going to close all the black gaps which is in the final outline. So I'll select my brush and I'll choose to use a black color with my brush. And just to make certain that I'm using the right brush, I'll go to my brushes and I'll select a hard round and just go into brush tip shape and set the spacing to be 1%, the shape dynamics to be controlled by pen pressure. And if I want to use this brush later on, actually I'm just going to make one change, which is to set the hardness to 95%. I'll just go to the burger menu then and actually add this as a brush that I'll be using in the future. So I'm going to click New Brush preset and save this as my brush for cartoons, and click OK. So now it will be located inside of my brushes area, and I'll be using this in the future. And I'll just switch the size. Okay, so we're gonna close the gaps right now, and I made a shortcut on my keyboard to increment the size of my brush by just clicking some buttons on my keyboard. This can be done inside of Edit Keyboard Shortcuts. Inside of Tools, I'll be able to find the one called Increase and Decrease Brush Size, and I set those to the Danish letters Ö and O, because no one ever uses those letters on a keyboard for shortcuts. So these are my shortcuts, and the next step is to just make my brush smaller. And if I'm using my iPad, you know, I can make thinner lines by just applying less pressure, and thicker line by applying more pressure. So if you're getting a really laggy brush where you have to wait for a moment before the brush actually appears on your screen, well, then perhaps it's because your brush settings is wrong. So inside of your brush settings, there is an area called smoothing. You need to be sure that this is switched off, especially if you're using an Apple pencil or you're using some kind of vacuum tablet. If you're using any kind of pen tablet, smoothing is really bad to have switched on. It's more like if you're using a trackpad and you have a hard time drawing a precise line, well, then smoothing could help you out. But it's really laggy. It will make the brush seem like it's lagging when you're drawing with it. So try not having this switched on, because it will seem like your program is lagging a lot. Okay, I'm gonna undo this stroke that I did right here. Just to make it seem more like it's a pencil drawing, I'm just gonna set the flow lower. This will be like, you know, when spraying with a spray can, the longer you spray, the stronger the stroke becomes. So likewise, the more I work in one area, the stronger this brush stroke becomes. So I'm just going to try coloring up this area, and you'll see that this way we can close up this gap right here. And there's a lot of gaps inside of this creature, so we're going to just try figuring out where these gaps are. And notice that I'm working on this layer called the final outline, because this is where all the black contour is. So I'm going to close the eye right here, just up here, and just look where there could be other holes inside of this figure. Seems like everything is in order here. I can always go back if I'm uncertain if all the gaps are closed. See down here by the fingers, there's also some small gaps. So I'll just close this one as well. Yeah, let's try adding some color. So the next thing I'll do is in my color layer, the layer I created called color, I'll just swap to using my paint bucket. I'll click X to swap to my original purple color that was in background color. By clicking X, I switch my background color to become foreground color, and I'll just try filling it with paint in all these areas that are supposed to be flesh toned, purple toned. And you can see that I can just, by doing this, add some color to these areas. And, oh, there was a gap. I'll just go back to that So there's some hole located in this last part right here. So I'll go back to final outline and just figure out where this hole is located. And it's probably somewhere inside of this tail right here. There's a hole right here. I'll click X to switch to black. And let's see if that helped. And I'll go back to my color layer, and there we have it. Let's put some color in here, and okay, so there's definitely some gap here as well, so I'm just going to, in the final outline, just make sure to color it black in this gap. So inside of my color layer, again I'm going to choose some different third color. So I'm just going to switch to my paint bucket and see if that will help. Yes, perfect. So now we have some fur added. And perhaps I'll give the disc some other color. Let's give it some yellow color. And perhaps actually I'll just, when using my brush, I can just hit Alt or Options to get my color dropper, and then I can choose some color that I used already. So I'm gonna use this fur color for the ears of this creature. So let's Alt click it so it gets this fur color. Then I'm gonna choose my paint bucket, which is G as gradient, and just fill in that area with color. And okay, so the ear has some color that's not supposed to be there, so I'm just going to switch to black to just make sure that there's no gaps. Let me just hide this color layer and just close all the gaps located inside of this area. So it's probably somewhere around here. And then in the color layer, I'll just choose again this color right here, and then just fill it with my paint bucket. Okay. Finally, we'll just add some color to the eyes. Let's say it has blue eyes, super duper, and perhaps some black pupils, and perhaps some white inside of the eyes, like that. And finally, the mouth will be red. I need to make that dark. And the tongue will be lighter, and the teeth will be white. Okay, so notice that there are all of these holes of white. That's the paint bucket makes these kind of fuzzy edges when you're using an outline inside of Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make these not appear by simply just switching to my brush and holding down Alt to select this skin color, and then basically I'll just make my brush size bigger, and I'll start coloring inside my colors layers. It's really important that you always work in the correct layer, because otherwise you'll start coloring your contour layer, or you'll start putting contour inside of your color layer, and this really makes it impossible to work with afterwards, because the contour needs to be on top of the color, so it's always covering the creature, covering the skin color. So I'm just gonna fast forward this, but basically just fill all the different colors in by using the brush, and when you're done with the skin color, just do the same process with all the same colors, doing everything in the same layer, the one called color. And you can use eraser if you go too far outside of the area you're supposed to draw your pen stroke in. You can just erase it afterwards using your eraser. Next step is to actually make the shading of this figure.